Ethan Harley woke before dawn, his chest tight, his mind restless. The house was silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock on the wall. He reached for his phone without knowing why, blinking against the dim light. A single message waited on the screen, sent hours earlier. The words were brief, almost polite, and that was what made them cruel. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." Below the text was a photo. Ethan stared at it, his breath shallow, his hands cold. The image showed his wife, Mara, sitting close to Daniel Cross. Daniel's arm rested behind her chair, his body angled toward her in a way Ethan knew too well. They were smiling, relaxed, caught in a moment that did not belong to him. The place was familiar. It was the restaurant Ethan and Mara visited every year on their anniversary. For a few seconds, Ethan convinced himself there had to be an explanation, a joke taken out of context, a moment frozen at the wrong time. But the longer he looked, the more the truth pressed down on him. Mara's smile was not polite or forced. It was open, easy, the kind of smile she had not given Ethan in months. He sat up in bed, the room spinning, the weight of the image settling deep in his chest. 12 years of marriage collapsed into that single frame. He moved through the house as if it belonged to someone else. The floor felt colder under his feet. The walls looked bare, stripped of meaning. In the kitchen, he poured water he did not drink. His reflection in the window looked older, hollowed out by a shock his body had not yet accepted. Every memory began to rearrange itself. Late meetings, missed calls, Mara's distant voice when he spoke about the future. All the signs he had ignored now stood in a neat line, accusing and clear. When the sun finally rose, Ethan had not slept. He sat at the table, staring at nothing, when his phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, Ethan considered not answering, but some instinct pushed him to accept the call. He wanted to hear it. He needed the truth spoken aloud. Daniel's voice was calm, careful. He did not sound ashamed. He sounded prepared. He said it had started slowly, that it wasn't planned, that feelings grew when Ethan was always busy. He spoke as if he were explaining a delay in a project, not the destruction of a friendship and a marriage. He said Mara felt unseen. He said Ethan had changed. He said no one meant for this to happen. Ethan listened without interrupting. Each word landed like a small cut, not sharp enough to scream over, but deep enough to bleed. Daniel did not ask for forgiveness. He did not promise to step away. Instead, he spoke of understanding, of how complicated life was, of how people sometimes followed their hearts. He sounded almost relieved to finally say it out loud. When the call ended, the silence was louder than anything Daniel had said. Ethan sat there, his hands folded, his breathing steady only because his body had gone numb. Anger did not rush in. Pain did not explode. What he felt was something colder, a slow, controlled pressure building behind his ribs. Mara came home later. That morning, she did not knock. She walked in as if nothing had changed, then stopped when she saw Ethan at the table. Her face softened, her eyes filling with something that might have been regret. She tried to speak, but Ethan raised his hand. He did not trust his voice yet. Words felt dangerous. She told him she needed space. She said she was confused. She said she never meant to hurt him. Ethan watched her pack a bag with careful movements, choosing what to take, what to leave behind. Each item she folded felt like another decision already made. When she left, the door closed gently. That gentleness hurt more than if it had slammed. Days passed. but time felt strange, stretched and thin. Ethan returned to work, where Daniel greeted him like nothing had happened. Meetings continued. Plans were discussed. Numbers were reviewed. Daniel spoke with confidence, his tone unchanged, his posture relaxed. He talked about trust, about partnership, about the future of the company they had built together from nothing. Each word felt like a test. Each smile felt like an insult. Ethan began to notice things he had once admired. The way Daniel took credit, quickly. The way he avoided blame with ease. The way people believed him without question. Ethan had trusted him completely. He had shared ideas, risks, and victories. He had brought him into his home. He had let him sit at his table, laugh with his wife, become part of his life. That trust now felt like a weakness that had been studied and used at night. Ethan lay awake, replaying conversations, moments, choices. He wondered when it had started. He wondered how long he had been the last to know. The questions had no answers that could help him, yet they refused to stop. His chest felt tight, not with panic, but with control. He was holding something back, keeping it contained. One evening, Ethan opened old files on his laptop, documents from the early days of the company. Contracts, emails, decisions made under pressure. He did not open them with a plan in mind at first. He told himself he was, only reminding himself of what he had built. But as he read, patterns emerged. He saw where Daniel had cut corners, where risks had been hidden, where trust had been assumed instead of verified. The realization did not excite him. It steadied him. Knowledge settled into place like pieces on a board. For the first time since that night, Ethan felt grounded. Not healed, not calm, but aware. He understood the balance of power better than he ever had before. Still, doubts followed him. He remembered long nights working beside Daniel, fueled by cheap coffee and shared dreams. He remembered Daniel standing by him during failures, celebrating successes. Those memories did not erase the betrayal, but they complicated it. Daniel was not a stranger. He was not evil. He was someone who had made a choice and justified it to himself. Ethan also thought about Mara, about the way she used to wait up for him, about how she once believed in everything he was building. He knew he had changed over the years. Work had taken more space than it should have. He had assumed love was stable, unbreakable. That assumption now felt naive, but understanding did not mean acceptance. Responsibility did not cancel betrayal. Ethan knew that clearly. He also knew that whatever came next would define more than just this moment. It would shape the person he would become after the damage. One night, standing alone in the living room, Ethan realized something that surprised him. He did not want apologies. He did not want explanations. What he wanted was balance. A sense that the cost of what had been done was real and acknowledged. The thought frightened him, not because it felt wrong, but because it felt justified. He began to imagine consequences, not loud or violent, but precise, professional, controlled. He imagined Daniel standing where he now stood, feeling the ground shift beneath him. The idea brought a brief, sharp satisfaction, followed by a deeper unease. Ethan wondered what that satisfaction would demand from him in return. As the days moved forward, the line between thought and intention grew thinner. Ethan remained calm on the surface. He worked. He spoke when needed. He smiled when expected. Inside, something solid was forming. A decision not yet made, but approaching. The betrayal had not broken him. It had focused him. And as Ethan looked ahead, he understood one thing with perfect clarity. What had been taken from him would not simply fade into memory. Whether through action or restraint, a reckoning was coming. Ethan's life settled into a careful rhythm. From the outside, nothing looked broken. He arrived at the office on time, spoke clearly in meetings, and answered emails with the same steady tone as always. Inside, his thoughts never slowed. Every moment felt sharpened, as if his senses were tuned to catch what he had missed before. He watched people more closely now, especially Daniel. He noticed how easily Daniel commanded a room, how quickly he adjusted his words to match whoever was listening. It was a skill Ethan had once admired. Now it felt calculated. The company moved forward with ambitious plans. Daniel spoke often about trust and unity, using the language of loyalty as if it were a shield. Investors nodded. Employees felt secure. Ethan listened without reacting. He took notes. He remembered details. Every promise Daniel made sounded louder to him, heavy with irony. Yet Ethan never challenged him in public. He understood that patience was power. At home, the silence was different from the office noise. The house no longer echoed with shared routines. Ethan cooked simple meals and ate standing up, not wanting to sit at the table alone. At night, he walked through empty rooms, touching objects left behind, not with longing, but with a strange detachment. Grief came in waves, but he learned to let it pass without drowning in it. Anger stayed longer. It did not burn. It waited. Ethan began spending late hours reviewing company records. He told himself he was being responsible, making sure everything was in order. That was partly true. The deeper truth was that he was searching for leverage, something that would restore balance. He did not rush. He read slowly, cross-checking details, following trails that others had ignored. He found inconsistencies. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, but enough to create pressure if revealed at the right moment. As he worked, memories surfaced. He recalled how Daniel used to talk about fairness, about building something clean and honest. Ethan wondered when that version of Daniel had faded, or if it had ever truly existed. The betrayal now seemed less like a sudden act, and more like the final step in a longer pattern of self-interest. That thought made the pain feel colder, but clearer. Mara sent messages occasionally. They were careful, distant, filled with uncertainty. She said she was thinking. She said she felt lost. Ethan read the words without replying. He did not want to argue. He did not want to beg. He also did not want to forgive too quickly and mistake weakness for peace. Her absence gave him space to think, and that space filled with questions he could no longer avoid. Was revenge justice, or was it simply another way to stay tied to the past? Ethan wrestled with that thought during long walks through the city. He watched strangers pass, each carrying their own private battles. He wondered how many of them had been betrayed, and what choices they had made afterward. The world did not pause for broken trust. It moved on, indifferent and fast. Still, the desire for payback did not fade. It evolved. At first, it had been raw, emotional, driven by hurt. Now it felt structured, almost reasonable. Ethan told himself he was not seeking destruction, only fairness. Daniel had taken something valuable without consent. There should be a cost. That belief settled into him with dangerous comfort. Daniel, meanwhile, seemed lighter. With Mara gone from Ethan's life, Daniel acted more openly confident. He joked more in meetings. He spoke about future expansions with excitement. He even invited Ethan for coffee one afternoon, speaking as if nothing stood between them. Ethan agreed, curious to see what Daniel would say. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. Daniel spoke about stress, about how life was complicated, about how people sometimes made mistakes. He said he hoped they could move forward as professionals, separate personal issues from business. His tone was calm, almost generous. In his own mind, Daniel had already forgiven himself. Ethan listened carefully. He noticed how Daniel avoided direct responsibility, how he framed everything as unfortunate but unavoidable. Ethan felt a tightening in his chest, not from anger, but from clarity. Daniel did not see himself as someone who had betrayed a friend. He saw himself as someone who had followed his needs and survived the consequences. After the meeting, Ethan felt more certain, understanding. Daniel's mindset made his own conflict sharper. If Daniel believed his actions were justified, then remorse would never come. That realization fed the part of Ethan that wanted action. Silence, he feared, might be mistaken for acceptance. The planning became more deliberate. Ethan mapped timelines, outcomes, risks. He imagined scenarios and tested them in his mind. Each plan required restraint. No public scenes. No emotional outbursts. Everything had to be clean, controlled. Yet every step forward pulled him further from the person he used to be. At night, doubts returned. Ethan questioned what victory would look like. Would seeing Daniel stumble ease the ache? Would it bring Mara back? Would it restore trust in a world that now felt unstable? The answers were unclear, and that uncertainty troubled him more than anger ever had. One evening, Ethan found himself standing in front of the mirror, studying his reflection. He looked the same, yet felt altered. The man staring back at him was sharper, quieter, more guarded. Ethan wondered if revenge would complete that transformation or consume it. He remembered advice his father once gave him after a childhood injustice. "You can spend your life collecting debts," his father had said, "or you can decide which ones are worth the cost." At the time, Ethan had not understood. Now the words echoed with weight. The conflict inside him deepened. Part of him wanted closure through action. Another part wanted release through letting go. Both paths promised relief. Both demanded sacrifice. The longer Ethan waited, the heavier the choice became. As the weeks passed, an opportunity began to take shape. A major presentation loomed. Decisions would be made. Reputations could shift. Ethan knew exactly where he stood in relation to that moment. The knowledge sat quietly inside him, steady and dangerous. By the end of part 2 of his journey, Ethan had not yet chosen his path, but he was closer than ever. The desire for revenge and the pull of restraint stood face to face within him. Whatever decision he made next would not only affect Daniel or the company. It would define who Ethan would become after the betrayal, and whether the cost of vengeance was one he was truly willing to pay.